Why do we love unconditionally? How can we change the education system? Is your professor really your enemy for requiring attendance? And what does that have to do with Taylor Swift? Howdy, I'm Ana Renfroe, and welcome back to the Batt Signal. For this week's episode, one of our senior news reporters, Justice Jenson, sat down with psychology professor Sara Dowd. Dowd is a beloved professor in the Texas A&M Psychology Department with an average 5 out of 5 star rating on Rate My Professor. Dowd primarily teaches classes for social sciences, but former students of hers say Dowd is one of the best professors at A&M because of her lessons. But just who is she, and why does she love incorporating Taylor Swift into her psychology lectures? Keep listening to hear Justice's full interview with her, and now for something completely different.
Beautiful. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Batt Signal. Today I have Dr. Sara Dowd with me. Dr. Dowd, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate having you, and I'm really excited personally to have a conversation with you. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun. What did you get your doctorate in? Where is your education?
I got my PhD here at Texas A&M.
Whoop.
Yeah, whoop. Gosh, everything about me has like a backstory. I originally I was very special. I was invited to be in two different labs, which kind of brought me into two different programs, clinical psychology and social psychology. And I was really interested in clinical, but I had a lot of issues with most things. Which is very much a theme of a lot of my classes.
Yes.
And in my youth, I still believe in the things that I basically protested the systems. And I still believe in the reasons I did what I did, but I also realized the clumsiness of it now in hindsight.
Right.
And so there's many long stories in there, but to make them shorter, I ended up getting my PhD in social psychology.
Got it.
Here at A&M.
Wonderful. But even though you are a doctor of social psychology,
Mm-hmm.
I've taken one of your classes, so I'm a little bit biased here, of course. But you don't like your students to refer to you as doctor.
I do not.
Why
I
is
prefer
that?
Sarah. For lots of reasons, and it's been every year I make the decision over again because I do understand the necessity for things like boundaries, but I also feel like things like boundaries, especially like with that level of formality, like calling me doctor, starts to really reinforce hierarchies that are based on metrics that I don't agree with. Like, even though I was able to get my PhD, I also feel like I was very mistreated by the education system. I half failed, half dropped out after freshman year.
Wow.
Yeah, I had to kind of claw my way back, and in clawing my way back, I realized that it is true that you can put effort in, and there's natural abilities and stuff like that, but also a lot of very brilliant people just don't get the respect that they deserve, and I feel like my PhD means very little compared to other things about me, and I've met undergraduates who are wiser than people who have many degrees, and I've met people with many degrees who are lovely people.
So, with you feeling maybe slighted by the education system a little bit, why did you decide to make that your career path then?
I didn't. I didn't. When I finished, I'm a very sunshine, I'm wearing pink today.
Yes.
I'm a very sunshine and roses person, it seems, but I also am a pretty angry little human. And when I finished my PhD, I just wanted out. It was COVID time, and I did get a job at a startup, which was virtual because it was COVID, and so I was still in College Station. And they asked me to come back to teach just one class, and so I did that. And the startup kind of went up in flames, and so I just kind of ended up teaching. And then anyone who knows me at all knows that I don't do anything less than 120%. And
It's true.
Yeah.
I can confirm.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Almost to a pathological degree. I should probably calm down. But yeah, so then once I started teaching, like that became my entire life, and now I just cannot get out.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you also like to integrate other parts of your passions into this teaching thing that you just kind of stumbled into and happened to be really freaking good at.
Thank you so much.
So you mentioned Taylor Swift in your class just about every lecture. So I do have to ask what the story behind that is.
Not every lecture.
Most of them.
Well, okay, so this is also one of the reasons why I really do prefer Sarah over Dr. Dowd.
Okay.
Because I think that genuinely Taylor Swift is a genius.
Wow, that's a very interesting answer to the question that I posed. Taylor Swift.
It's so true, though. Like, if you really read her lyrics, I think she tells the truth about what it means to be a human, both in general and what it means to be a good human, striving to better humanity in every possible way.
Right.
Better than a super fancy, article in a peer-reviewed journal.
Fair enough. So you're a big part of your class that you like to introduce, especially going through the psychology of adjustment like I did, is Carl Rogers' concept of unconditional positive regard.
You remember?
Of course I remember that. I do my research.
Yes.
But why is that such a big deal to you? Why do you believe that that's such a core concept that it's something you need to hit on in many of the lectures that you teach?
Yeah. Thank you so much for asking that. What a good point. I do bring that into every class I teach.
Every single one.
No matter what the topic, like right now I'm teaching psychology of aging, so
Yes.
like basically psychology of elderly people.
Right.
I still do mini lectures on unconditional
Interesting.
positive
I didn't
regard.
know that.
Yeah, every class I teach, you will hear about Taylor Swift, and you will hear she's in there too somehow.
Of course.
And unconditional positive regard. And the reason is, okay, so unconditional positive regard is basically unconditional love and unconditional respect. And psychology, like if you really want to know what it means to be a human and what it means to be a good human, the idea that you can detach the concept of love, I think is A, inaccurate, and B, just so sad. And so unconditional positive regard, the fact that you even have to call it that instead of unconditional love, I think speaks to like an issue in the field. Like
Okay.
basically we're constantly competing with physics, and to say unconditional love, like that's a fluffy topic.
Yes.
So instead they had to create this other term for it. And I both am kind of upset about that, and I also am really grateful for it, because the idea is like it is this scientific and serious endeavor to practice listening to people, kind of like defending them.
Yes.
And that is a little bit of a light switch, that at some point humans are successful because we are competitive and because we're social. And when you learn the competitive thing, each conversation is kind of like searching for what the person is saying that's either wrong or that you can correct, or you're trying to figure out like, is this person part of my clan or
Right.
group or whatever or not, like always kind of suspiciousness. And unconditional positive regard is like this light switch, like I'm going to defend this person, I'm going to put active energy into searching for all the best parts of them and communicating that, and the truth that changes everything is an epiphany. And I think if Dr. Rogers hadn't created that separate term for it, everyone would just be like, well, yeah, of course,
Right.
I listen to everybody with an open
And
mind.
brush it off, yeah.
Yeah, like if you're a bad person if you don't do that. No, people spend their entire lives studying how to do that. It is serious business.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you believe a big part of that this is another thing you talk about in your classes is active listening, and you just
Yeah.
mentioned it a little bit.
Yeah.
Why do you believe that is such a critical aspect of unconditional positive regard?
Oh, gosh, I love active listening too. That's every class also. So, can I tell a story from
Of
my
course,
class?
of course.
Okay. So, one of the things that I was really displeased with in terms of clinical psychology is the idea that it exists in this totally separate world. And once you have that diagnosis, the medical model suggests like there's something sort of wrong with you. Of course, we have much lighter terminology nowadays, but the model still exists that you're not functioning at this like average level, or you're not feeling normal in some way. And so some sort of treatment can kind of like bring you back to a certain threshold, fix you, basically.
Right.
And therapy is one of those mechanisms. But when I was in grad school, we had this professor. So in clinical psychology, there's really two types of people who pursue PhDs. One is the type of person who wants to become a therapist. And they were like the people and like kind of like the cool kids.
Right.
And then there's the ones who want to do research, and they were the smart kids. And it was subtle but obvious. And I think the same kind of stereotypes persisted in terms of the professors. And so my first interventions professor was definitely a researcher. And the first day, he slams down these papers on the table and he's like, this is all you need to know about therapy. And I was appalled by this. I was like, you're not taking this seriously. I want a different professor. In the back of my mind, because I hadn't learned unconditional positive regard yet.
Of course.
Yeah. And so, so I actually read it, and it was on active listening. And as soon as I read it, I was like, dang, I think he might be right. And the idea that real relationships are the transformative experiences, that it's not about getting a fancy degree per se, but at the same time, those skills are serious skills. But if you just actively listen to people, like, that is the healing and the growth element, changed me. To me, that was like, this is how you change the world. It doesn't happen in this highly sensitized, separate medical room. It's like a conversation where somebody is listening to you for
Right.
just wanting to know you and to help you work things through. And that's all it takes, is this shift in energy. I'm going to listen, not listen to respond.
Right.
And that is the therapeutic mechanism. To me, that, like, once I realized that and started practicing it, and it changed everything for me, I was like, this is like it, you don't have to be just healing or changing or growing in a therapeutic context. In fact, then you get kind of like addicted to the therapist. You want to be that change element in your actual communities, in every conversation you have.
Right. So what kind of a bit of that is that the world isn't changed through some sort of big, Machiavellian action. It's changed through the acts of individual people every day, almost.
Ooh, I think that's you. I think that's your thought.
Oh,
Tell me more.
oh no, oh no! I broke the rules. I did what I wasn't supposed to do.
We knew this was gonna happen. We knew the.
I tried to avoid it. I tried to avoid it.
What do you tell me more?
No, don't therapize me. That's not how this interview works, Dr. Dowd.
Exactly how this interview works. So ends justify the means?
I was saying more just that it seems that more good is done by the common man doing the right thing than people at the top thinking they can fix the world through some sort of maybe government policy or maybe some sort of forced cultural shift. But I think that may be a little bit above my pay grade because I am a 20-year-old college student.
Hey, I think 20-year-old college students can absolutely change the world. And it's sort of ridiculous that you have to constantly prove yourself before you're taken seriously. And truthfully, I think it's a little bit of both. Like, one of the reasons why I got my PhD in social psychology is, yes, because of things that went awry and my opinions on clinical stuff and whatnot. But another reason is because, like, social psychology is also thinking about the systems. And the fact of the matter is that the way the world is set up is really, I know that there's all sorts of political conversations we could have about, like, the worst parts of it, but if you're being just, like, honest, it's very obvious that it's wrong that some people are homeless.
Yes.
And other people, like poor Queen Taylor, like, yes, she's a billionaire now, but she can't leave her home. Like, for there to be that much of a disconnect between the top and the bottom serves literally no one. And I do think we need those big changes. However, the idea that those big changes are then suddenly going to equal peace and happiness is simply not true if we're going to graduate past our current currency model, for example. That means that people have to decide and know how to respect one another.
Right.
And that those skills are harnessed and tailored and created in every single interaction you have along the way. So you need both, but people tend to only complain about and seek out and think the answer lies in, like, governmental systems.
Right. Fair enough. Okay, so you mentioned kind of that therapy, it's kind of like a fixing the person kind of method, and you're not a huge fan of that. Do I get that kind of right?
Well, I think that most therapists are
Okay. Okay.
tremendous people who, and I think that everyone should go to therapy at least once.
Okay.
Like, I really respect therapy, and those coping tools are necessary to learn. But the idea that that's going to cure depression, I think, insinuates that it's possible to overcome depression when you open TikTok and see wars and violence, and or you go on Tinder and go on a date and realize that the person doesn't know how to listen to you. Like,
Right.
pick a struggle.
So kind of jumping off of that, another big concept that kind of relates to this in your classes is you teach that maybe students, perhaps, and I'm trying to phrase what she usually types out on the board in parentheses, which she likes to intercede into a lot of her sentences, um, that she thinks maybe, perhaps, that it is the, excuse me, I just lost my train of thought because I made a stupid joke.
No, if they could see my test, you would know what a good roast that is. So many parentheses. I think I have typed out the word perhaps more than any other
Yes.
person that has ever lived.
But in that, you say that students should potentially think of themselves as perfect.
Yeah.
And maybe based on the amount that you defend it in class, that makes me think that maybe that's one of your ideas that you've gotten a more significant amount of pushback. Maybe not pushback. Maybe that's not the right word, but the amount of challenge on. So why do you perhaps believe that, and why do you believe that so many people kind of go up in arms whenever they hear that?
Yeah. Okay, well, first let me start off with one of my hopes, and I think one of the big fears when people hear that is, especially an adjustment, because adjustment is about like change and really growth and adaptation to the environment, both within individual people and in their social relationships and the social construct or the social like milieu, environment, whatever, in general. And when the assumption is you're perfect to begin with, then it's like, well, then why would I change? Like, why would I? The idea is like, then motivation decreases and we stop trying and whatnot. But I see that truth as being like a tall glass of water. Like, you spend your life, a significant portion of people spend a significant portion of their lives trying to list out all the things that are wrong with them and trying to fix it. When the truth is, like, if you exist within this social environment, parts of you reflect that environment. So my favorite example is I talk about zooming in and zooming out. And so if you zoom out on all of humanity, this is going to come to it's going to be a surprise to no one. There's more violence in impoverished areas than wealthy areas.
Right.
And so when we think about violence, like, that's one of those things that people get all up in arms about. Like, what do you mean everybody's perfect? Some people murder people. Okay, well, let's look at a couple examples of when and why that happens. I'm not saying this is always what happens, but it's important enough where, bear with me.
Right.
So
No, take your time.
Thank you.
Take your time.
So okay, most people will look at that and be like, well, yeah, so what? But if you understand the reasons why, if you decide to see the world that we live in, the systems, as being a much bigger problem than we know what to do with, and we really kind of ignore it because we feel powerless to change it, the idea is the alternative of that reality, where people are more violent in impoverished areas versus wealthy areas, is that everyone's just a good little robot. And it doesn't matter that you're living in tremendous debt, not sure how you're going to pay your bills, so on and so forth. You just do your job. You don't act out. And that seems like that's what most people are trying to get themselves to do when they think they're not perfect, is to do what they're supposed to. But if you take the moments where you seem to fail and you take that to be indicative of the environment, like, I'm reflecting the environment that I'm in, it allows you to zoom out and see what's really going on with the world. And the hope is that by giving people that tall glass of water, it doesn't mean like, I think most people, what they do with it, or at least the hope that what most people do with it, is then they have more agency. They have more choice. Like, okay, I've had a really bad day. I don't know if I can be there for my friend right now. Or maybe what my friend needs to hear right now is anger. Like, lots of people will see anger or crying, like any emotion at all, as being indicative of like failure to emotionally regulate or something like that. But the other way to look at it is it's quite a privilege to see somebody truly emoting how they actually feel. And if you were to quote unquote successfully emotionally regulate and shut that down and not yell or whatever it may be, then you never give that person in your direct environment the opportunity to know you and perhaps work together to figure out best next steps. And then if you zoom way out and look at society, the idea is if everybody was this perfect little robot and just did what they were supposed to do, it'd be really easy for us to be okay with some people living in squalor and other people being seeming to have it all, but truly being like a constant target.
Right. So yes, kind of touching on that idea of zooming out a little bit more. Yet another concept that I keep mentioning because these seem to be consistent themes throughout her work
Mm-hmm.
is you tend to see yourself as an alien,
Yeah.
or you like to say that you do, and you like to say that you like to view everything through the lens of you are not from this planet. Why do
Mm-hmm.
you think that perspective is so important?
Um, I think it's important for a couple different reasons. One is that if I can be honest, and it's going to seem a little narcissistic, so you'll have to forgive me, but I spent a lot of time purely seeing everyone else as being perfect just the way they are. And I had to save some of that for myself and allow myself to see myself that way too.
Of course.
But yeah, I took everything I thought I believed in the world that made me feel like a good person and completely was willing to turn the tables. And it meant trusting a lot of other people a lot. And it created this sense of equality, like the whole Dr. Dowd versus Sarah thing. Like, that's both a wonderful thing that I do, and it does also influence my self esteem a little bit. It's like no matter what I earn, the things that other people earn that they are willing to say, like, I have earned this and it makes me different, I don't believe in any of that. But the truth is, if you really go through that in your life, if you really see everyone through these unconditionally loving and respecting eyes, it simply does make you different. And it's this thought experiment I've been able to use to protect myself a little bit, and also declare for myself some sense of respect in a like whimsical tongue-in-cheek way, because
Right.
I don't think anyone believes I'm an alien, and I don't necessarily like I don't necessarily intend on taking a genetic test to see if I have extraterrestrial blood, but it allows me to see myself as different, but not in like a better type of way because it's so comical.
Right.
And genuinely, it's a really great thought experiment. Like, in moments, anyway, being able to purely observe has helped me tremendously. However, the truth of who I am is when I'm feeling my feelings, when I'm back in my flesh suit, I
Yes.
also fully experience my humanity. And really, by the end of the class, I hope that's what my students get. Like, you have moments where you zoom out and feeling like you get on your spaceship and simply observe is wonderful, but also because choosing to do that also allows you to choose to be back and sit in the moment and really feel it too.
Right. I mean, maybe there's some point to that considering the stat that I just read. That was my one stat. I'm very proud of my one stat.
Good job.
Yeah, thanks. I needed that. Oh no, she's doing it again. She's trying to therapize me. No, I have to stay away. No, but anyway, yes, obviously something's working.
Yeah.
So if people have their opinions, everybody gets some negative reviews here and there. But considering that of the 92, you have 4. You also kind of talked about how that wasn't always the case.
Yeah. So something that I'm really passionate about is changing the education system. Both like my true hope for myself is that one day I'll be able to make a bigger difference than just class by class or student by student. I do feel like I've learned certain truths, and I've had certain experiences partly just because I've earned them and I'm claiming some of that, and partly because I am meant to contribute grandiosely. Um, but in the what I have learned, I don't think that it's possible for anyone to work harder than I do. So like this, but not everyone. Like my exams are sort of insane. Like they're
800 pages of words. And that's a slight exaggeration.
I think it's 500 600 for your class. And I know that not everyone will read it, and like that number sounds like bad. That
Right.
sounds like, oh, so she made you read a textbook.
I was intimidated.
Yeah.
I was very intimidated.
At first, but then you start reading and it's fun.
Exactly.
It's got music.
It's a show.
Yeah.
It's a show. That's what it is.
Exactly. It's meant to be an experience. It's meant to be like, okay, you thought you needed Netflix at the end of the day, but it turns out that Netflix was trying to show you what I'm trying to show you
Right.
too. And the way that they work also is that most people get A's, and I wanted that to be the case. I think it's the direction that education's going. The Green brothers, for example, they make Crash Course and stuff like that. They're working with an online school right now where basically you don't have to accept your grade at the end of the semester. If you don't like your grade, you can take the class again and it just goes away.
Interesting.
Yeah, kind of like if you paid for a CPR class and you didn't pass the CPR class, they're not going to take your money and not let you pass. You're going to pass.
Right.
So it's kind of like shifting education in that direction. And so that's why I'm okay with that for my exams. But it's all of those pages, but everybody also knows that you can just go to the multiple choice portion,
Yes.
read a couple sentences, and get it over with. And not all, it takes both sides to make a change. Like when you're a student, it's really easy to see the professor as being just the enemy. And what I've found is by trying really hard to not be the enemy, like it's really hard to see me as the enemy, in order for me to make a difference and not be just a brush off class, the students have to be willing to respect me in the same way. And for the most part, I've gotten that respect, but there was one semester where, yeah, it was very brutal. And it changed the way I teach too. And I try to make it clear that, change has to come from both directions. Where there was one weekend, I also put the most amount of effort into grading papers. Like, the amount of effort that I put into grading papers is insane. I have left 40-minute voice message analyses at the end of students' papers, more than I've ever gotten. Anyways, so there was this one week I was teaching class adjustment, and it was the weekend where I was grading their papers, and something just told me to rate my professor. And I checked rate my professor, and my heart just dropped because over the course of that weekend and that weekend alone, I got something like 1 out of 5 ratings.
Wow.
I watched my
one
score.
weekend.
Yeah, and it was a random weekend in the semester too. I still to this day feel like maybe they were messing with me or something because it was so strange. And they said the cruelest things. Like now if you look, it looks like I'm being dramatic because some of them were so mean that some of my other students reported them and they got taken down.
Yeah.
So now it looks like I have like 3 or 4 bad ratings, but for over the course of a weekend, I felt my world crush. It was like everything I believed about myself was a lie.
Right.
And it was just so brutal, especially because that was the first semester where I started to require attendance. Because the truth is, people who come to my classes really do love my class, but I know you guys are so exhausted that even if you literally had a TED Talker in there every week, I genuinely think that you still wouldn't go if you didn't have to.
Right.
And so if the tests are going to be easy, I'm mostly the type of grader that just tells you your best qualities, which I think is different than being easy. Like I put effort into cultivating my students' best qualities. Like, God, it takes so much time. Then I have to at least be able to require attendance. Like at least give me a chance to teach you something, like just show up.
Right.
And that semester was the first semester I required it, and it was like, oh no, you're actually not a good professor. It turns out people just liked you because they didn't have to go to class and you were an easy A and all of that work was for nothing.
Right.
It was soul crushing. So yeah, it looks good now, but that weekend was one of the worst things that has ever happened to me.
That's super interesting.
Crushed my soul.
I bet, because you spend your whole time pouring into hoping to pour into these people, and that's how you're repaid. And it just feels like I'm assuming a dagger to the back.
Yeah, but it taught me to stand up on my own too.
I was about to say, maybe it taught you something. Maybe it was there for a reason.
I love that perspective because it's very like positive, and I also hate it because I feel like it justifies suffering. Like,
right?
Yeah.
When she also loves to talk about hashtag nihilism, and
Yeah.
the hashtag always comes before the nihilism, and because of the fact that, from my understanding, she says that it allows it allows you to just kind of say whatever, and just say, well, this is a thing, nothing matters anyway, we move on. Which seems a little contradictory to the unconditional positive regard aspect of your class. So how do you justify those two things?
Yeah, it's also contradictory to like the effort that I put in.
Right,
and
all
that
the
I
stuff
try
that
to-
you've been talking about.
Yeah. Well, and here's why. Because, like, truth be told, and I think, like, in an interview like this, like, I'm so appreciative that you wanted me here. I feel very validated. And that rating makes my life look a certain way.
Right.
And it makes some students, like, kind of want to be like me. Like, been a lot of work, but it's also really badass that I, like Taylor Swift and am able to put Taylor Swift music videos. Like, it
Right.
looks like the dream. And it starts to look like there is a way out, like in the way the world currently is.
Yes.
That happiness. This is gonna get dark.
Go for
which
it.
is why nihilism is important.
Go for it.
It makes it look like happiness, like true happiness, is possible in the way the world is right now. And I know that some people say that that's true, and I would never want to take that away from them. However, as somebody who did go through a phase in my life where, the first 2.5 years of grad school, I was the happiest person that existed. Every morning I woke up just so grateful,
Right.
and ready to seize the day, and I was going to change the world and whatnot.
You wore even brighter pink, I'm assuming?
Even brighter pink, if it's possible. But I think it'd be a little bit of a lie for me to sit here and be like, that's how I see it now with a bit more maturity. I think as an educator, and especially the type of educator that gets really high reviews, the people that get high reviews are happy and they make other people happy. But I have a lot of problems with that because I don't think that the world is anywhere near good enough, anywhere near what we deserve. I think that a lot of people who are happy are doing a ton of emotional labor
Yes.
to be able to access that even some of the time. And I don't think it has to be like that. So another thing that I think that makes me different is I will tell my students that I don't find my life to be particularly good or satisfying. I don't feel like it's possible for me to be happy with so much desperation in the world. I feel very held back in my current position. Like, I feel very grateful to be able to teach. I don't think people are meant to teach the same 4 classes twice a year, every year for 50 years.
Right.
I read the last two of the last articles y'all have done on professors, and one was on a professor who makes this tremendous difference in all of his students. And he also has really high Rate My Professor ratings. But then, you look up his salary, and it's like, tells a very different story of a quality of life of the professors that put a ton of effort into teaching. Like, the lecturers will only teach. But then there was another article on how maybe tenure track professors or tenured professors, they're really here for research, and maybe that doesn't make a great professor. But the truth of the tenure track professors' lives is to have to publish, 5 papers a year.
Right.
Imagine your hardest day of work where you have to write a paper. Then imagine you have to go put on a performance for 200 sometimes people, or sometimes the smaller classrooms are even harder to
Really?
pull. Yeah. When it's 35 5 people and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and they're all looking at you dead-eyed, and it's nobody's fault. But like,
because everybody's tired, including you.
exactly.
Up front and in the seats.
Yeah. So, and if your whole job is research, to shift gears like that and suddenly also have to be excellent at teaching, that's insane. It is an insane world. And so I think that when I try and summarize just how bad it is, and I need to get that across to people, it is bad because I know I make people feel good and it makes it feel all comfy in the world, and it's not good. It is not good. We need change immediately, both in the way we treat each other on a day-to-day basis and the larger systems, which I think also those changes need to come from people who are able to look internally and treat other people well as well. So you have this incredibly positive sort of narrative, and like, you can do it. And I believe that people have to see themselves as perfect and see themselves as capable. Because right now everyone has this learned helplessness, like, oh, maybe someone can make those changes, but certainly not little old me. Yeah. So you need that inspiration. But I also need to get across, and then that makes my students feel good. I also need to get across some dark truths, and I need to get it across on a personal level and on like a worldwide level, because first world people tend to be like, yeah, things are terrible in the third world. No, it's also brutal here, but yes, also the third world is really bad.
Right.
And the summary of all of that leads to a lot of confusion, and so I've found #nihilism to be this really wonderful sort of like segue from that balancing act to like, so choose which wolf you feed, but also maybe it doesn't matter, and maybe just have fun.
Right.
Because I also remember what it's like to be 20. And you know what? Some of my best lessons were found in like bars. In 21, sorry.
Of course.
Never under.
Naturally.
Yes. So truly like having fun while also acknowledging that really tough balancing act is another quintessential part of life, and #nihilism just been really useful to me.
Yeah, maybe it's like a little bit of a comedic deflection to the
For
dark
sure.
truths.
Yeah.
Maybe it softens the blow a little bit.
Yes, it's an extra ingredient.
Yes.
I wouldn't say it's like the final answer, but when I feel like I've gone a little too hard, it's a little like,
Right.
nihilism.
You guys can't see her, but she's putting it something into what I'm assuming is a witch's cauldron.
Exactly. I have been accused of witchcraft.
Really?
Yes.
Aliens and witches. What has Dr. Dowd not been accused of? That's my question, personally.
That's a good question. I don't want to know the answer.
She doesn't want to know the answer? That's great. So, as we kind of move towards the end, I would say that maybe it takes, like you said, because you want to acknowledge both the positive that you're obviously putting into the world, but you also want to acknowledge the fact that it costs a lot for you to do that.
Yes.
That it's not easy in the slightest.
I would not wish my life on anyone that I cared about, even a little. I do not stop working. If you think it's hard to read 500 pages of things that are legitimately entertaining, as well as profound and educational, and meant to be fun and meant to make you feel things, to write it while teaching 4 classes. And, you know, I'm not paid to do research, but a really important part of my undergraduate career was that I had research mentors who believed in me before I was in a PhD program. I actually published more in undergraduate than I did in grad school or since then. Yeah. And because I think when you're at an R1 institute like Texas A&M, the tenured professors or tenure track professors, they have grad students, and so that's another thing that I think undergraduates don't understand about tenured professors. It's like being asked to do like 5 different jobs, but then, you know, lecturers have to teach more classes. It's brutal for everyone. But anyway, so a lot of the research projects go to the grad students, and the undergrads, you know, mostly just collect the data. And for some people,
the grunts.
Yeah. And for some people that is the appropriate level, but I know that I was capable of publishing peer-reviewed work when I was an undergrad, and I meet some undergrads, I'm like, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to as well.
Right.
But it's really hard for them to get on projects with people who are also responsible for grad students. So somehow I've managed to makeshift a research lab as well, and I have 2 projects going. I had to collaborate with tenured professors because they're allowed to collect data from participants. I wasn't allowed to collect data from participants. So besides teaching the 4 classes, where I also do a lot of grading work, I write these exams, I have the research projects, and then...
And you teach ballet.
Yeah, I also have a bunch of side gigs because I don't pay us very well. It's been brutal, and I wish that I could say that it was worth it. And when I, have moments like this, or when I get really kind emails, I would never say that it's not worth it. However, I will say, and I will die on this hill over and over again, I would not wish this on anyone. And I really wish that more people in my position were more honest about it, because if it seems like the world is in a good enough position where you can be like Sara or Dr. Dowd or whatever, and like that's the way out, everyone just keeps perpetuating the way things are. So I feel this constant need to say, like, no, this is not good enough. I'm willing to say it's not good enough for me, and I really hope that other people are willing to say it's not good enough for them either. That being said, I am eternally grateful. I'm eternally grateful that some of my students decide to read my work. I'm eternally grateful for every single kind email I get, every single positive comment, and even the harsh ones made me stronger. Don't do it again.
There we go.
Just kidding. Even the harsh ones, I love all of my students. I love all of my colleagues. I just want better for everyone, which means you have to be willing to say when it's not good enough.
Of course. Right? The world needs those kind of people.
Yeah.
So, what would you say for me, just your regular Joe Schmo college student? What can we do every day? What kind of mindset can we have? What actions can we partake in to move this world in the right spot? Because obviously you put a lot of thought into that question.
I have to let that.
Because you believe that where you're at right now has at least some utility, though it does have a cost on you.
Mm-hmm.
You do believe that what you're doing is putting something positive into the world. So if you could sum up something to tell the common man based on all of your alien witchcraft experiences, what would be the boiled down version to the best of your ability? And I know that's a tough question, so I'm trying to buy you a little bit of time here.
It is,
because that's a lot of words, as I know personally, a lot of words to boil down into a little bit of words.
Yeah.
And because you have to take that shift, a lot of the nuance that you often like to acknowledge is harder to come by.
It is, yeah. That's always my worry, that I'm only going to give one portion of the truth, when
Right.
one of the reasons why I write so much is because it's always complex.
Perhaps is her favorite word.
Yeah, I go to seek the great perhaps. I don't know what it means to be average, because I see all people as being tremendous people. What I like to say is all people are good, some people are exceptional, and I need to be able to hold that truth, and you are exceptional. So I don't know what an average Joe Schmo is, and I will answer your actual question in a moment.
Of course, no, take your time.
But that is not you. In fact, one thing you said to me, I'll paraphrase it.
Of course.
But as positive and sunshine and roses as I am, I also am a big fan of gangster rap, and as I'm walking to class in my flowery dresses, I will be listening to Eminem.
You'd 21 Savage.
Oh,
just
yeah.
blaring in her pink dress.
Yes, I go ready for combat, yo, and I'm willing to drop some diss tracks.
Can we get that? Is that a possibility? Jamie, can we get that? I'm sorry, I'm referring to my imaginary Jamie.
I see.
Because
Hello, Jamie. Because one of the things you said is we were chatting about how some people really do seek the great mysteries and other people don't. And I think when you do seek the great mysteries, you're going to, and you do try and give a lot of unconditional positive regard, you're also met with haters. And it is necessary and important to be able to call the haters mean or stupid or whatever, thing works for you that day. And so I still remember us talking about that, and I appreciate that forever. So I don't know. I don't think you're an average person, but back to your question about on average, what can people do to kind of be the change? And I think that one is to really tear down the boundaries that we see between people. In some ways, your professors have the power. In lots of ways, they're the weaker men. In lots of ways, nothing changes. The people who see themselves at the bottom of the hierarchical ladder, you have to be able to advocate for yourself when that's, sometimes true. But it's not the truth that it doesn't seem to be the case that anybody is driving the ship. It doesn't seem to be the case that people we elect into power in politics, for example, actually have the power to change things.
Right.
And so constantly looking to them and being they're the problem, or constantly looking to the professor and be they're the problem, and not being willing to access the moments when you're the solution, or at least a portion of the solution.
Yes.
Is just as problematic as not being willing to acknowledge the moments when you're the victim or whatever it may be. So I think like constantly seeking opportunities to be awesome is really important, and that means different things to different people. Yeah, like really trying to think outside the box, because perhaps the worst problem is that we keep mindlessly perpetuating that which is not working. And so anytime you can step outside the confines of that situation is in some ways a win. And I think, the kindness part, the unconditional positive regard, I swear that is like a light bulb moment and it
Yep.
changes you. But it doesn't mean that every interaction has to be purely sunshine and roses. It's just as important to be honest about the dark stuff too.
Right. Maybe love isn't always nice.
Yeah. Yeah, like you can be loving and still be screaming at somebody.
Right. And maybe tell someone the truth that they need to hear, even if in the moment that's not going to make them feel all sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
Right.
I think usually the most loving people, it's like if you look at just one moment in time, they look like everybody else. But if you just give them a couple days, suddenly stars continue to rise. Some sort of metaphor like that. I don't know.
She's losing it. All right, we got a literally hot. It's really hot in this
It's
room.
so hot in
Yes,
here. Oh
it's
my
it's
goodness.
tiny. Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you for our budget. It's wonderful. But anyway,
Advocate for yourself.
I'm working
Watch
on
them
it.
laugh at you.
Yes, I already have.
I know, I'm sorry. The systems are bad. Kindness and all that, crap, but also the systems are bad.
Right. And kind of on your point, one last thing about that, maybe random acts of kindness. A lot of things that I've seen personally is that maybe in those little moments of just doing some stupid little thing, like remembering somebody's birthday or wishing, like noticing maybe someone's not having the best day and texting them that night, something like that.
Yeah.
A lot of that I've noticed in my personal life, especially after taking your class. I've noticed that those little moments mean more to people and to me personally. I've felt that than some sort of big grand gesture.
Yeah, I think that's true. But on the other hand, I do think that there are moments in time that call for
Right.
big moments in time.
Of course.
And we don't really know how to pursue those because it means stepping outside
Of
some
the
bounds.
system.
Yeah, it takes quite a lot of bravery, I think, to really do tremendous good.
Right.
Yeah. But the little acts are not little. They are sometimes the one breath of relief we get from someplace that is often rather dark, if we're totally honest.
Right. Maybe that little act of kindness with somebody sending an email allows you to keep doing your thing, right?
Oh my gosh, sometimes that is like the reason that I get up. Like those emails are just, yeah, like everything to me, which is both amazing and so sad.
Words on a screen and all that.
Yeah, but they're so meaningful to me. Or like, I'll be having a bad day and a student will show up at my door, and in the back of my office door, and in the back of my head, like I'll have a passing thought of like, oh, I wanted to just watch YouTube for a second, and then as soon as I start talking to them, I'm like, this is so much better than YouTube.
Right.
Like, and everybody has those thoughts. But if you let people surprise you, I don't know, they do. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right, thank you, Dr. Dowd.
Thank
She
you.
she has been a wonderful guest. I'm very grateful for her spending her, obviously we just talked about this, very limited time here. So we've absolutely had a blast having you. So thank you for coming out. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Beautiful.
If you enjoyed today's episode or know a staff member you think should be featured, let us know by emailing us at metro@thebat.com. For all of our other news content, visit our website at thebat.com or pick up a print edition on stands every Thursday. This week's episode is brought to you by Justice Jenson and produced by Ana Renfroe. Make sure to check out previous episodes of the Batt Signal, Home Turf, and Calculated Culture, available wherever you get your podcasts.